The Type VII U-boat was not just a submarine, it was the backbone of Germany's entire naval war effort during World War II. More than 700 Type VII boats were built, making it the most produced submarine type in history at the time. When people imagine German U-boats stalking Allied convoys across the Atlantic, they are almost always picturing a Type VII. Designed in the mid-1930s, the Type VII was created to be compact, efficient, and deadly. Germany needed a submarine that could be produced quickly, operated by relatively small crews, and deployed in large numbers. The result was a vessel that balanced range, speed, and firepower better than any previous U-boat design. The Type VII measured roughly 67 meters in length and displaced about 760 tons surfaced. It was powered by diesel engines on the surface and electric motors underwater, allowing it to travel vast distances while remaining difficult to detect. While not luxurious or comfortable, it was practical, and in wartime, practicality mattered more than comfort. Life aboard a Type VII was brutal. Crews of around 44 to 52 sailors lived in extremely cramped conditions. There were no showers, limited fresh water, and very little personal space. Food was stored everywhere, under bunks, in passageways, even in the torpedo room. As patrols stretched on for weeks or months, fresh food spoiled, air became stale, and exhaustion set in. Despite these hardships, the Type VII proved terrifyingly effective during the early years of the Battle of the Atlantic. Armed with 4 bow torpedo tubes and 1 stern tube, it could fire devastating spreads at Allied merchant ships. Many boats also carried a deck gun, allowing them to finish off damaged vessels or engage lightly defended targets without wasting torpedoes. The U-boat commanders developed deadly tactics around the Type VII's capabilities. The most famous was the wolfpack strategy, where multiple submarines coordinated attacks on convoys at night, often on the surface. In the early war years, Allied defenses were weak, radar was limited, and air cover was sparse, conditions that heavily favored the U-boats. However, the Type VII also had limitations. Its underwater endurance was short, forcing it to surface frequently to recharge batteries. As Allied radar, sonar, and aircraft improved, surfacing became increasingly dangerous. Depth charge attacks grew more accurate, and losses mounted rapidly after 1943. Germany attempted to improve the Type VII with upgrades such as the Type VIII-41 and snorkel systems that allowed limited underwater diesel operation. These upgrades helped, but they could not fully counter Allied technological superiority. By the end of the war, the Type VII symbolized both German naval ambition and its ultimate failure. It inflicted enormous damage on Allied shipping, but at a terrible cost. Thousands of U-boat sailors never returned home, making submarine service one of the deadliest roles in World War II. The Type VII remains the most iconic German submarine of the war, a machine that defined underwater warfare and shaped the course of the Battle of the Atlantic. While the Type VII dominated the North Atlantic, the Type IX U-boat was designed for a different mission: long-range warfare. These submarines were larger, heavier, and capable of operating far from Europe, reaching the waters of Africa, South America, and even the Indian Ocean. The Type IX displaced over 1,100 tons surfaced, making it significantly larger than the Type VII. This extra size allowed it to carry more fuel, more torpedoes, and supplies for extended patrols that could last several months. In theory, it was the perfect submarine for cutting Allied shipping routes across the globe. Inside, conditions were still harsh, but slightly less cramped than on smaller boats. Crews appreciated the extra storage and endurance, though comfort was still a luxury that simply didn't exist. Every patrol pushed sailors to their physical and mental limits. The Type IX was armed with 6 torpedo tubes and carried up to 22 torpedoes, giving it significant striking power. Many were also equipped with powerful deck guns, making them formidable surface raiders in poorly defended waters. Early in the war, Type IX boats achieved dramatic success. They operated in areas where Allied defenses were minimal, sinking merchant ships almost at will. These submarines became infamous along the American coastline during Operation Drumbeat, exploiting unprepared defenses and brightly lit coastal cities. However, size came with disadvantages. The Type IX was slower to dive and less maneuverable than the Type VII. As Allied air patrols expanded and radar coverage improved, these weaknesses became deadly. Long-range patrols also meant longer exposure to enemy forces. Despite improvements and variants like the Type IXE, losses increased sharply by 1943. Many long-range U-boats were hunted down far from friendly ports, with little chance of rescue if damaged. By the war's end, the Type IX represented Germany's global ambitions, and the reality that even advanced submarines could not overcome overwhelming Allied industrial power. The Type XXI, known as the Elektroboot, was the most revolutionary submarine of World War II, and arguably the most important submarine design of the entire 20th century. Unlike earlier U-boats, which were essentially surface ships that could submerge temporarily, the Type XI was designed to remain underwater for extended periods. Its sleek hull, powerful batteries, and advanced systems allowed it to travel faster submerged than most submarines could on the surface. With an underwater speed of up to 17 knots, the Type XXI completely changed the rules of naval warfare. Allied sonar and depth charge tactics were built to counter slower submarines. The Type XXI could simply outrun many of these threats. It featured 6 forward torpedo tubes with an advanced hydraulic reloading system, allowing it to fire devastating salvos in rapid succession. In theory, a single Type XXI could destroy an entire convoy before escorts even knew it was there. However, timing was everything, and Germany was too late. Although over 100 Type XXI submarines were built, very few became operational before the war ended. Rushed production led to mechanical problems, poor workmanship, and training issues. Not a single Type XI conducted a successful combat patrol before Germany's surrender. Yet its influence was enormous. After the war, both the United States and the Soviet Union studied captured Type XXI boats extensively. Their designs directly influenced Cold War submarines on both sides. The Type XI was a glimpse into the future, one that arrived just too late to change the outcome of the war. The Type II U-boat was small, compact, and often underestimated. Nicknamed canoes by their crews, these submarines were designed for coastal operations and early war training missions. Measuring just 40 meters in length, the Type II was cramped even by submarine standards. Crews of about 25 sailors lived in extreme confinement, with minimal supplies and almost no comfort. Yet these boats played a crucial role in rebuilding Germany's submarine force before the war. Armed with only 3 torpedo tubes and carrying a very limited number of torpedoes, the Type II was not intended for long patrols. Instead, it operated in the North Sea, Baltic Sea, and coastal waters. Despite their limitations, Type II boats scored early successes and trained many of Germany's future U-boat commanders. As the war progressed, they were increasingly used for training rather than front-line combat. By 1943, the Type II was largely obsolete, but its contribution to Germany's submarine program was foundational. The Type XP U-boat was one of the largest and most unusual submarines ever built by Nazi Germany. Unlike most U-boats designed to hunt ships with torpedoes, the Type XP had a very specific and dangerous mission: underwater mine warfare. At over 89 meters long and displacing nearly 2,400 tons submerged, the Type XP was enormous by World War II standards. Its size was necessary to carry its primary weapon, up to 66 naval mines, stored in vertical shafts within the hull. These mines could be deployed silently in enemy-controlled waters, turning shipping lanes into deadly traps. The Type XB was not fast or agile. Its large hull made it slower to dive and easier to detect, which meant missions had to be planned carefully. Instead of direct attacks, these submarines operated covertly, laying mines near ports, harbors, and strategic choke points used by Allied shipping. When successful, the results were devastating. Mines laid by Type XB submarines sank or damaged dozens of Allied ships, often without the Allies even knowing a submarine was involved. This psychological impact made mine warfare one of Germany's most effective naval strategies. However, the Type XB had weaknesses. It carried only two stern torpedo tubes, meaning it was poorly armed for self-defense. If detected, escape was difficult. As Allied anti-submarine tactics improved, these large boats became increasingly vulnerable. Only 8 Type XB submarines were ever completed, and losses were heavy. Still, their impact far exceeded their numbers, proving that submarines didn't need torpedoes alone to control the seas. The Type X U-boat was designed before the war as a long-range submarine capable of laying mines and carrying supplies. It represented Germany's attempt to create multi-role submarines that could operate independently far from Europe. Earlier than the Type XB, the Type X featured a large hull capable of carrying mines internally, as well as fuel and provisions for extended patrols. This made it suitable for operations in remote waters, where resupply was impossible. Although technologically ambitious, the Type X suffered from design limitations. It was slow, difficult to maneuver, and mechanically complex. As newer designs emerged, the Type X was quickly overshadowed by more efficient submarines. Only 2 Type X submarines were completed, and their operational impact was limited. However, they served as important test platforms, influencing later large submarine designs such as the Type XB. In many ways, the Type X represents Germany's early experimentation phase, when naval planners were still discovering what submarines could and could not do effectively. The Type XIV U-boat, nicknamed Milchkuh or Milk Cow, was one of the most strategically important yet vulnerable submarines of World War II. Unlike attack U-boats, the Type XIV never hunted enemy ships. Its role was to keep other U-boats alive. These submarines were floating supply depots. They carried fuel, torpedoes, food, spare parts, and medical supplies, allowing combat U-boats to remain on patrol far longer than otherwise possible. Without the Milchkuh boats, Germany's Atlantic campaign would have collapsed much earlier. The Type XIV was unarmed offensively. It had no torpedo tubes and relied only on anti-aircraft guns for defense. Its large hull and slow speed made it an easy target once detected. Allied intelligence quickly realized their importance. By 1943, Milchkuh submarines became top priority targets. Long-range aircraft and escort carriers hunted them relentlessly. Once the supply U-boats were destroyed, German patrol endurance collapsed. Frontline submarines were forced to return to port more frequently, reducing their effectiveness and accelerating Germany's defeat in the Battle of the Atlantic. Every Type XIV submarine was eventually sunk, a testament to both their importance and vulnerability. The Type XXI U-boat was one of Germany's most ambitious and experimental submarine designs. Its goal was simple but revolutionary: true underwater speed, powered by a hydrogen peroxide-based propulsion system. The Type XC could achieve underwater speeds far beyond conventional submarines. In tests, it reached speeds that stunned naval engineers on both sides of the war. However, innovation came at a cost. The propulsion system was dangerous, unstable, and difficult to maintain. Accidents were common, and the submarines required highly trained crews. Only a handful of Type XXI submarines were built, and none entered full combat service. Despite this, their influence was profound. After the war, both Britain and the Soviet Union studied these boats carefully, incorporating lessons into future submarine development. The Type XT showed what was possible, but also what was impractical under wartime conditions.